The shrimp looked fresh, pink, plump, sitting perfectly on ice under the soft fluorescent lights of the seafood counter at Walmart in Port Arthur, Texas. But behind the glass, that shrimp had already traveled over 8,000 miles from the polluted coastlines of Thailand. And worse, it was peddled by trafficked laborers working 16-hour shifts for less than $4 a day. This isn't just a one-off horror story. What you're about to hear is an expose on 5 major U.S. retail chains where the seafood on display may be hiding disturbing secrets ranging from dangerous chemical contamination to human rights abuses buried deep in global supply chains. And if you bought shrimp, salmon, or tilapia from any of these places, you might have already eaten it. 1. Walmart, a bargain too good to be true. In 2015, the Associated Press released a bombshell investigation exposing slave labor in Southeast Asia's fishing industry, labor that, according to customs data, was connected directly to Walmart's seafood supply. Men were held in cages. Some were beaten to death. Others said they hadn't seen land in over a year. Fast forward to today. Walmart has pledged reforms, certifications, and stricter supply chain standards. But repeated follow-ups, including a Human Rights Watch report in 2023, suggest loopholes remain. Products like farmed shrimp and tilapia continue to arrive from regions in Thailand, Vietnam, and Indonesia known for murky labor practices and lax enforcement. And the safety. In 2022, Consumer Reports tested dozens of Walmart's frozen seafood items. 1/3 had detectable levels of veterinary antibiotics, drugs not approved for human consumption. Walmart declined to comment when confronted. It's the illusion of affordability. That shiny $4.98 shrimp cocktail platter, it might have a much higher cost, just not one reflected on your receipt. Behind closed doors, Walmart executives have held confidential meetings about what they call brand erosion. Internal documents leaked to Reuters in 2022 showed growing concern over consumer backlash tied to seafood origin scandals. If the solution wasn't to overhaul the supply chain, it was to rebrand perception. That's why you'll notice vague labels like sustainably farmed or responsibly sourced instead of specific details about the fish's journey. Transparency, it turns out, is bad for business. Take their frozen salmon line. While advertised as Norwegian or Atlantic, many of these fish are first raised in China, then shipped to Norway for minimal processing just to earn the prestigious Norwegian origin label. It's technically illegal and deeply misleading. And Walmart's pricing model only makes things worse. Because the retailer demands ultra-low costs from suppliers, fish farms cut corners, overstocking pens, skipping water filtration systems, and using unapproved chemicals to prevent disease outbreaks. By the time the frozen fillet hits your cart, it's likely passed through 5 countries and 4 corporations, none of which you'll ever see named on the package. Even worse, independent lab tests in 2023 revealed trace levels of nitrofurazone and chloramphenicol, 2 powerful drugs banned in the U.S. in certain imported shrimp and tilapia products sold by Walmart. The FDA issued no recall. If you think that's rare, think again. In the global seafood trade, traceability ends where your receipt begins. 2. Costco antibiotics, mislabeling, and the wild salmon scam. You think you're buying wild-caught Alaskan salmon at Costco. You even pay a premium for it. But in blind DNA tests conducted by Oceana, a nonprofit focused on ocean conservation, over 20% of salmon labeled wild from major retailers including Costco was actually farm-raised. In 2018, the New York State Attorney General called out several grocers for seafood mislabeling. Costco, though not the worst offender, was mentioned among chains that failed to verify labeling at the supply level. Why does this matter? Because farm-raised salmon, especially from China, is frequently treated with antibiotics banned in the U.S. and linked to environmental pollution. And let's talk about Costco's famous shrimp trays. According to a 2019 Greenpeace report, Costco sources shrimp from companies with documented labor rights abuses in Southeast Asia. Costco responded by stating they were reviewing policies but did not commit to dropping the suppliers. The bottom line: when you shop at Costco for seafood, what you see may not be what you get, and what you get might not be safe. Let's talk tuna. At Costco, the giant yellowfin steaks look impressive, priced higher than most competitors. But what you won't see is where the tuna came from or who caught it. In 2022, the Outlaw Ocean Project, an investigative journalism nonprofit, revealed that some of the world's major tuna suppliers, including those tied to Costco, were linked to illegal fishing operations in the Indian Ocean and South Pacific. Fishermen from Indonesia and the Philippines reported brutal working conditions. Some were at sea for 10 months straight. Others died aboard and were buried in unmarked graves at sea. These suppliers used flags of convenience to hide their ownership, making it nearly impossible for regulators to trace accountability. Costco, when confronted with the findings, responded by stating they take sustainability seriously and were reviewing the matter. Then there's the matter of microplastics. According to a 2023 study from Arizona State University, frozen cod and haddock sold at big box retailers including Costco contain the highest average number of microplastic particles per gram among tested seafood. These plastics come from polluted waters, broken down packaging, and contaminated fish feed. Even for fish labeled wild, cross-contamination at processing plants often means consumers ingest microplastics without knowing it. And health risks. Still largely unknown, but early studies link microplastics to inflammation, hormone disruption, and even DNA damage. You're not just buying fish. You're buying whatever it absorbed. 3. Whole Foods, the organic illusion. Whole Foods markets itself as the gold standard organic, sustainable, ethical. But not everything behind the seafood counter is as clean as it seems. In 2019, The Guardian broke a story that shook the ethical food crowd. Whole Foods was selling farmed Atlantic salmon from Norwegian companies whose operations were under investigation for polluting fjords with fish feces, antibiotics, and parasites like sea lice. These fish were raised in crowded pens, fed unnatural diets, and often treated with chemicals banned in wild fisheries. Worse, these salmon were sold under the responsibly farmed label, a Whole Foods certification that critics say lacks transparency and meaningful oversight. According to Seafood Watch, Monterey Bay Aquarium's watchdog, some of Whole Foods' farmed offerings fall into the avoid category due to high environmental impact. And yet, shoppers believe they're making the healthiest choice. In a world where perception equals reality, Whole Foods has mastered the art of the illusion, selling high-end guilt-free fish that might not be as clean as their brand suggests. Whole Foods thrives on reputation. Their seafood counter is designed to feel like a curated boutique, not a commercial grocer. Ice beds are fluffed every hour. Labels mention ocean depths and fishing methods. There aren't even staff fishmongers trained to talk about sourcing. But here's the hidden truth. Much of Whole Foods seafood is governed by private third-party certifications, many of which are neither government-regulated nor independently verified. The Marine Stewardship Council, MSC, for instance, has been criticized for certifying large industrial fisheries that still use destructive practices like bottom trawling. Take the swordfish labeled as harpoon caught in select Whole Foods stores in California. While some are indeed caught this way, Oceana found that others came from drift gill nets banned in many countries due to their high bycatch rates, especially of dolphins, turtles, and sharks. Yet the responsibly sourced label remained. Why? Because under Whole Foods' internal policy, as long as the supplier meets a certain criteria, most of the time, they're eligible for blanket labeling. Consumers paid more to feel good about their food. But at Whole Foods, you might just be paying for prettier lies. And don't be fooled by the in-house Trace Your Fish app. Investigations by the Washington Post found that the app's data was often outdated, generalized, or based on supplier-provided summaries that weren't audited by third parties. In other words, you're trusting the supply chain to police itself. That's like trusting a casino to run your savings account. 4. Kroger toxic imports and mystery labels. At a Kroger store in Memphis, Tennessee, a retired veteran named Dale Harbrough bought frozen catfish labeled product of USA. Weeks later, he discovered after digging into a local news expose that the fish was imported from Vietnam and repackaged domestically. It wasn't illegal. It was just deceptive. Kroger has been repeatedly flagged for mislabeling practices, especially on lower-cost seafood. But the real concern is what comes from overseas. Much of Kroger's frozen fish, including pangasius, also called swai, tilapia, and shrimp, originates in heavily polluted regions of the Mekong Delta and South China Sea. These waters have been the subject of multiple FDA import alerts for contamination with malachite green, a chemical banned in the U.S. due to links to cancer. Yet due to overwhelmed inspection systems, much of this seafood still gets through. In 2021, NBC News featured a segment showing swai from Vietnam labeled as cleaned and inspected in the U.S., but with no meaningful testing involved. And guess which chain was front and center? Kroger. For many shoppers, Kroger represents familiarity and affordability. But beneath the surface lies a seafood system where safe can sometimes just mean not caught yet. One of Kroger's most frequently sold frozen fish products is sway, a white-fleshed fish, often marketed as catfish or besa. It's cheap, abundant, and incredibly profitable for big grocers. But where it comes from and how it's raised will make your stomach churn. Sway is farmed almost exclusively in Vietnam, particularly in the heavily polluted Mekong Delta. Local environmental watchdogs have reported outbreaks of Vibrio, a bacteria linked to food poisoning, in waters near sway farms. These farms often use river water contaminated by industrial waste, untreated sewage, and pesticide runoff. A 2021 FDA import bulletin flagged multiple Vietnamese exporters for excessive antibiotic residue. Yet much of this fish still entered the U.S. often through third-party brokers who repackaged it under American-sounding brands like Harvest Bay or Ocean Select. Kroger shelves carry these brands prominently. And here's where it gets murkier. Under U.S. law, seafood that is processed or packaged domestically can be labeled product of USA, even if the fish was raised, caught, and frozen overseas. That's how a fish born in a Vietnamese cesspool ends up with a patriotic red, white, and blue sticker on Kroger shelves. Kroger has promised to increase traceability in its 2024 seafood policy. But as of this writing, no third-party audit has confirmed whether that promise is being kept. Buying seafood at Kroger is like spinning a wheel. Maybe you'll land on clean domestic fish, or maybe you'll end up with a toxic import wrapped in an American flag. 5. Trader Joe's quirky packaging, questionable sourcing. Trader Joe's might be America's favorite quirky grocery store, but when it comes to seafood, it's playing a dangerous game of trust. In 2020, Seafood Watch issued a caution on Trader Joe's frozen shrimp, sourced from India, notorious for antibiotic overuse in aquaculture. Despite this, the product remained on shelves, without warning labels or sourcing transparency. Trader Joe's doesn't publicly disclose full supplier lists or participate in third-party sustainability certifications like NSC, Marine Stewardship Council. This lack of transparency is a red flag in an industry where abuse, contamination, and fraud are common. Take their canned tuna. In 2021, Greenpeace ranked Trader Joe's 16th out of 23 major brands for tuna sustainability. Critics blasted the chain for vague commitments and a lack of traceability in its supply chains. So while the nautical labels and pastel packaging may make it look like the seafood was hand-caught by a smiling sailor named Joe, the truth might be murkier and a lot less charming. Trader Joe's has built an empire on branding. It sells you a story, a lifestyle. The frozen seafood aisle is no exception. Fancy fonts, coastal colors, and labels like wild Argentinian red shrimp or caught by small vessels sound comforting. But it's what they don't tell you that matters most. Trader Joe's has refused to release a full list of its seafood suppliers. Unlike competitors like Target or Safeway, they don't participate in Global Fishing Watch, a nonprofit transparency initiative that tracks where seafood is sourced. In plain terms, you have no idea where your fish came from, and they're not obligated to tell you. Take their popular frozen ahi tuna steaks. Independent testing in 2023 by Footprint revealed mercury levels that were concerningly close to FDA limits. While technically legal, the findings raised alarms about the sourcing, suggesting the tuna was caught in high-risk regions where mercury contamination is common due to ocean mining. And let's talk shrimp. India and Bangladesh supply much of the frozen shrimp found at Trader Joe's. These regions are under scrutiny for labor violations and aquaculture pollution. When The Guardian tested frozen shrimp from various U.S. stores, Trader Joe's samples had the highest level of ethoxyquin, a preservative banned in Europe, due to links with liver damage in lab animals. Ethoxyquin is used during long-haul shipping to prevent spoilage, but it's not required to be listed on labels in the U.S., which means shoppers never know. At Trader Joe's, the packaging may be cheerful, but the sourcing is shrouded in secrecy. And in the world of seafood, what's not said is usually the most important. This isn't about fear. It's about facts. When you buy seafood from these stores, you're not just making a shopping decision. You're voting for what kind of world you want to live in. One where ethics matter, or one where profit silences truth. Maybe you'll still shop at these places. Maybe convenience will win, but now you'll know. You'll know what those low prices really mean. You'll know why that salmon was so pink. And you'll know why that shrimp was just a little too cheap. This isn't about shame, it's about awareness. Because when millions of us choose differently, the system has to change. The tides only turn when enough of us stop swimming with them. So next time you walk into Walmart, Costco, or Trader Joe's, take a second, look at the label, and ask yourself, do you know where this fish came from? If the answer is no, maybe the real question is, do you still want to eat it?